the Ohio State Buckeyes preview and prediction video. By the way, guys, if you guys agree with this, give us a like. If not, let us know in the comments down below if you disagree. But I'm going to start it off with the offense here. I'm going to talk about last season real quickly. Ohio State went 11-2, 8-1 in conference, lost the Cotton Bowl to Mizzou. As we know, say what you will about bowl games, Ohio State didn't play a lot of people in that game. It was a really good game, though, by the way. But offensively, though, 30.5 points per game last year. That was 45th in the country. Took kind of a step back offensively. I think most people would agree with that. They averaged 407 yards per game, which was top 50th in the country. Kind of a crazy stat here, but normally the past, I think, 4 or 5 seasons previous to that, they were top 20 or top 15 every year. So definitely did take a little bit of a step back last year with that offense. So, but it's a new year. It's 2024. They bring in Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator, which I think was a awesome move for Ohio State. They're out with Kyle McCord. I think he kind of got shit on a lot, Christian, last year. The guy only lost 1 game. I didn't think he played probably up to the expectations of most Ohio State fans, but overall, he did do all right. He's over at Syracuse now, and in with Will Howard, right? The K-State transfer, got a lot of experience. How will he fit in with Chip Kelly, in this offense? We'll find out this year, but I think it was a good move on Ohio State's part overall. Obviously, Ohio State loses super stud Marvin Harrison Jr. at wideout, but look, this is Ohio State. We know what they do with the receiving core every year. They got NFL talent across the board. Seems like forever now. They got Emeka Egbuka. He's back. You got Carnell Tate as well. And then you got super stud true freshman who everybody in the country is talking about, Jeremiah Smith. This kid will be really good, by the way. I've seen some footage of this dude. Wow. Running back, Travion Henderson. We know he's really, really, really good. He got banged up last year. But, this is typical Ohio State. They bring in another super stud in Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss. If you guys didn't know, he led the country, I think his freshman year at Ole Miss, or not led the country, but led the SEC in rushing his freshman year. So if you haven't seen him play, he's a must watch. And then overall, like I said, the offense returns 6 starters on this offense. They do fill a few pieces up front on the line, but I think Ohio State's going to be good there. I really do. Like I said, there's one thing about Ohio State. They recruit incredibly well. And I expect to see probably a big step forward in as far as points per game, yards per game this year. I think Will Howard, it might be rough at first, but if he really gets into this offense and Chip Kelly gets him going, I think Ohio State's offense is going to take a major leap from last year. Chris, you want to tell me about that defense, though?
Yeah, Chris, look, Jim Knowles in the defense, top 3 last year, right? And I think they're going to be a top 10 defense again this year, right? Probably the only area of concern for the Buckeyes on the defensive side of the ball. They lost Chambers and Eichenberg at the linebacker spots. 2 guys that have been there, played a ton of football for them. 2 of the best linebackers that I really thought last year in the country. But here's the thing. The D-line is just going to be as dominant as ever. I mean, look, they've got Jack Sawyer. They got JTT. I'm not going to even try to pronounce that last name. I'm sorry about you. I'm going to ruin it, but you already know. He's a really good player. Tyleik Williams, they all combined for 14.5 sacks last year. They're all back for him. Okay, the linebackers are going to be led by Cody Simon. All right, he had 57 tackles last year. Let's talk about the secondary, Chris. They get Alabama transfer Caleb Downs at the safety spot. He was a do-it-all guy last year for the Crimson Tide. He could be that back-end safety for you. He could come up and play that run, kind of like that hybrid linebacker type safety that you see a lot more now in college. He's a really good player. Look, I think even though they lose 2 fantastic linebackers that we talked about, I think they're going to generate even more pressure this year, and they're going to be just as dominant when it matters most. So with that being said, Chris, we'll go ahead and we'll do their record prediction. Make it very easy for you. I got them going 12-0 this year. I don't think they lose a game in the regular season. I think this is the revenge tour / gotta win it all year for Ryan Day. You don't make a move to bring in Chip Kelly to be your offensive coordinator, a guy who's the head coach at UCLA, like Chris was talking about, going into this year, as a matter of fact, unless you tell basically Ryan Day, hey, you got to do something this year. You have got to make a deep run at this thing, and we expect championships. And when you look at this roster, they should expect that. If you're an Ohio State fan, you 100% should be expecting to win a national championship this year. And anything less, I think, will probably come across as a disappointment for them. You know, I'll let Chris kind of go in depth a little more on the schedule and tell me why I'm right, if you don't mind.
You know, it's funny. I wrote down 12-0 as well. I was on board here. You know, normally most years, I think people think I shit on Ohio State. I think you said it best. The expectation for Ohio State fans is national title or bust. Let's be honest. That's what it is. It's what it has been. I know they're tired of losing to Michigan every single year for the last 3 years. I'm with you. There's not a more talented team on a roster than Ohio State this year. I mean, you could maybe make the argument Georgia, Oregon, who they do play. But Ohio State's just got it everywhere. And I think a lot of this comes down to Will Howard. I do. I mean, we've had discussions on this channel. Do we think he's, you know, a clone of Kyle McCord, you know, and he's going to have to play better than Kyle McCord did last year. But with the receiving core, the running backs, the offensive line, you talked about that defense is definitely going to be top 10 this year. There's only one game really on this schedule, Christian. And I think this isn't a hot take or anything. It's the at Oregon game. I think that will be probably one of the top games in the country this year. I think they'll both be rated inside the top 5. I mean, it's not a hot take. I think that's going to be a really good game. Could Oregon win that game? Absolutely. But I think just this year feels like an Ohio State type of year. They are odds on, I think, the second favorite to win the national title. That's Vegas. That's the betting public. I think their win total set at 10.5 as well. So, I mean, a lot of people expect them to win. You can still make the playoffs at 11-1 or 10-2 this year, I think, for the most part. So, yeah, I expect a great season overall. Christian, do you see any sort of floor, I guess, I got for you here? Or, you know, we know the ceiling. We both said 12-0. But what do you think, like, what would be the floor, in your opinion, for Ohio State this year if things maybe don't go as well as they should?
I would say 10-2 at the worst. 11-1 is probably a little more realistic to me. Like you said, Chris, I mean, looking at this schedule, you know, Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall to start the year off, all at home. Then you travel, like the first real-ish game, if you want to put it that way, is Michigan State week 4. You know, the problem with that, though, is Michigan State has, you know, they got a new coach. They got a new team that's pretty transfer portal driven. So, yeah, it's on the road, but I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Come on now. They get to play Iowa right after that. Look, Iowa, I'm going to be honest, defensively, they'll be just as good as they always are. Offensively, I don't see how they get better, you know, drastically better. Like, you know, if Iowa had a top 50 offense, I mean, they would probably be competing for championships. The problem is you're not going to go from being dead last in the country in offense this year, or last year, I should say, to all of a sudden having a top 50 offense. So I don't think they're going to stay into it. Like you said, Chris, for me, this season, if you really want to make the argument, doesn't even really start until October 12th when they got to go travel to play Oregon. So I 100% agree with you. Let me ask you, what are your thoughts on the the floor? We know the ceiling already.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's 10-2, which I think if you're Ohio State would, like I said, potentially get you into the playoffs at 10-2. But there's only a couple games really where I would say if they played 10 times, maybe Ohio State drops one of those games. Obviously, it's Oregon. I think that game, you know, potentially is a coin flip. But then you got at Penn State. That'll be a tough game. And we haven't talked about Penn State yet, but I mean, if Penn State's offense gets going one of these years, I think this could be a tough game just because both defenses are going to be really good. But I'm one of these people now with James Franklin. I got to see it to believe it. Finally, I'm off the James Franklin hype train. But you know, you end the year Michigan, right? And I think that's a must-win game for Ryan Day. I do think it'll be a good game, but obviously we know Ohio State's just got more talent this year than Michigan. They lost a ton, as we've talked about. So 10-2 would be the floor for Ohio State. I don't see it getting much worse than that.
I want to ask a follow-up question too, real quick, Chris. If Ohio State loses 2 games this year in the regular season, do they fire Ryan Day?
I don't think you do, because I think they'd get into the playoff. What about you?
Well, let me preface that with I 100% agree with you. If you lose 2 games, would you win the Natty? It doesn't really matter. But if he loses 2 games and they get bounced in like the opening or second round of the playoffs, they don't even make it to the final. Do you keep him?
Man, that's a good question. I know he's a hard coach to talk about because we've had this question thrown around at us a lot. If not, let us know down in the comments. That I'd like to know that answer. I think that's really tough. Do you have an answer to it, Chris? I really don't. I think if that does happen, there will be talks. There were talks already last year about potentially firing him.
Listen, I think, like we said to start this off, anything less than a national championship this year, you don't bring in a guy like Chip Kelly to be your offensive coordinator unless you are sending that statement out that you're going to win a national title, or we're going to probably promote this guy to be our head coach.